My name is Megan Ashworth. I'm 31 years old, and 3 months ago I found out my father had sold the one thing my mother left me in this world, without telling me a single word about it. If you're new here, let me be clear about something before I start. This isn't a story I found online. This isn't something that happened to a friend of a friend. This happened to me in Ohio, in a small town called Millbrook, where my family has lived for 4 generations. And when it was over, my father looked me in the eye and told me I was overreacting about a house. It wasn't just a house. Let me back up. My mother, Diane Ashworth, died when I was 22. Pancreatic cancer. Fast, brutal, over in 5 months from diagnosis to funeral. She was 51 years old, and she spent the last of her strength making sure that one thing, one single thing, would belong to me no matter what happened to the rest of our family afterward. That thing was the lake house on Cobalt Creek, 40 minutes outside Millbrook. It wasn't fancy. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch my grandfather built with his own hands in 1974, a dock that needed restaining every other summer, and a smell cedar and lake water and my mother's rosemary plants on the windowsill that I would know blindfolded from 1,000 miles away. That house had been in my mother's family for 3 generations before it ever got to her. Her grandmother built the original cabin. Her father expanded it. My mother inherited it outright when he passed, and it was, in every legal and emotional sense, hers alone, never touched by my father's name, never part of any joint account, never mixed into the family finances. When she got sick, she didn't leave it to the family. She left it to me, specifically, by name, in a trust. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office 3 weeks after the funeral, my father on one side of me, my mother's older sister, my Aunt Carol, on the other. The lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Harmon who'd handled my mother's affairs for over a decade, read through the trust documents line by line. "The property known as the Cobalt Creek Residence," he read, "including the land, structures, and dock, shall be held in trust for the sole benefit of Megan Diane Ashworth, to be transferred to her outright upon her 28th birthday or upon her marriage, whichever occurs first. Until that time, the trustee," and here he looked up, "shall maintain the property in good condition and shall not sell, mortgage, lease, or otherwise encumber the property without written, notarized consent of the beneficiary." The trustee, named in that document, was my father, Richard Ashworth. I was 22. The house would be fully mine, no strings, no trustee, no oversight when I turned 28. That was 6 years away. My mother had done that on purpose. She told me in one of our last real conversations, lying in that hospital bed with tubes taped to the back of her hand, "I want you to have time to grow into it, sweetheart, not just get a house dumped on you at 22. But I want it locked so tight that nobody, and I mean nobody, including your father, including anyone he marries, can touch it before then." I didn't understand at the time why she was so specific about including anyone he marries. I understood 4 years later, when my father married Denise Cole. Part 2, DNIC. I want to be fair here, because I know how these stories usually go, and I don't want you to think I hated my stepmother from the moment I met her. I didn't. Denise was polished, friendly, always complimented my hair, always remembered my coffee order. For the first year or 2, she made an effort, and I made an effort back, because my dad seemed happy and lonely and I didn't want to be the daughter who couldn't let her father move on. But Denise had a son from a previous marriage, Bryce, who was 26 and had never held a job for longer than 8 months. And somewhere around year 3 of the marriage, small things started happening that I noticed but tried to explain away. My dad stopped inviting me to the lake house for the 4th of July, the one holiday tradition my mother and I had kept alive every single year since she died. When I asked why, he said Denise's family was using it that year. When I offered to come anyway, just to see it, just to sit on the porch for an hour, he got strangely tense and said the plumbing was being worked on and it wasn't a good time. I let it go. I had my own life, a job as a physical therapist in Columbus, a fiancé named Josh, wedding planning that ate up most of my mental energy. The lake house sat in the back of my mind as a promise, a countdown. 28, 2 more years, 1 more year, 6 more months. Then, in March, 4 months before my 28th birthday and 4 months before Josh, and I planned to get married that September, which, remember, was the other triggered date in the trust. I got a phone call from a woman named Patty Voss. I didn't know Patty Voss. She introduced herself as the new owner of the house on Cobalt Creek, and she was calling because she'd found some mail addressed to me still coming to the property, and she wanted to know if I wanted her to forward it or if she should just toss it. I remember standing in my kitchen, phone against my ear, absolutely certain there had been some kind of mistake. "I think you have the wrong house," I told her. "That property belongs to my father's family. It's not for sale." "Oh," she said, sounding confused now too. "No, honey, we closed on it back in January. Richard Ashworth, that's your dad." The floor sort of tilted under me. We closed in January, 4 months ago. My father had sold my mother's house, my house, the one legally locked to me in a trust that would fully vest in 4 months, and he had not said one single word to me. Part 3, the confrontation. I didn't call my dad first. I'll admit that. I drove straight to Mr. Harmon's office, the same lawyer who had read that trust to me 6 years earlier, because some part of me needed to hear from a neutral, legal voice that this was actually as impossible as it felt. Mr. Harmon pulled the file. He went quiet for a long moment reading through something, and then he looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as deeply uncomfortable. "Megan," he said, "I need you to understand I did not handle this sale. Your father used a different attorney for the closing, and I want to see the paperwork he used, because based on the original trust document I have right here, this sale should not have been legally possible without your written, notarized consent." So how did he do it? Mr. Harmon didn't answer that right away. He told me to give him 48 hours to pull records from the county recorder's office. I drove to my father's house that same evening. Denise answered the door, saw my face, and immediately called for my dad, in a voice that told me she already knew exactly why I was there. My father came into the living room looking, for the first time in my adult life, like a small and cornered man rather than the steady figure I'd grown up trusting. "Dad, tell me you didn't sell Mom's house." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Megan, sit down, let me explain. Tell me you didn't sell it." The market was hot. We needed the money. Denise's medical bills from her hip surgery were. "That house wasn't yours to sell." My voice cracked, which made me furious at myself because I didn't want to cry in front of him. I wanted to be ice. "It was in a trust. In Mom's trust. You were the trustee, not the owner. How did you even do this?" And this is the part where my father said something I will never, for the rest of my life, stop hearing in my head. "There was an amendment," he said quietly. "Your mother signed an amendment in her last few weeks, giving me full authority to sell if needed for medical or family financial hardship. I had it notarized. It's legal, Megan. I'm sorry you're upset, but it's legal." An amendment, signed by my dying mother, giving him full authority. I had never heard of any such amendment in my life. Part 4, and my mother's last paper. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with Josh across from me, going through every box of my mother's things I still had in my closet, cards, photos, the notebook she used to write down her chemo schedule, anything that might explain an amendment I'd never known about. 2 days later, Mr. Harmon called. His voice had a different edge to it now, sharper, almost angry on my behalf. "Megan, I found the amendment your father is referring to. It was drawn up by an attorney named Gerald Fenn, not by me, dated 11 days before your mother passed. Your mother was, according to the hospital's own records from that week, on a heavy morphine drip and had been flagged by 2 separate nurses for confusion and disorientation." My stomach dropped. "Fenn's practice," he continued, "was actually shut down by the Ohio Bar 3 years ago for exactly this kind of thing, drafting last-minute estate documents for incapacitated clients at a family member's request. I remember the name because there was a whole scandal about it in legal circles." I felt sick. My father hadn't just quietly sold my house. He had, at some point during my mother's dying days, brought in a shady lawyer to get her to sign away my protections while she was drugged out of her mind on morphine, and then sat on that secret for 6 years, waiting for the right moment. "So we can fight it," I said. "We can prove she wasn't competent." "We can try," Mr. Harmon said carefully. "It's going to be a hard case. Undue influence and lack of capacity claims are difficult even with strong medical records. It could take years and a lot of money, and there's no guarantee." I hung up the phone and I sat there in silence for a long time. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. 3 weeks before she died, before the amendment, before the morphine drip got heavy, back when my mother was still sharp and lucid and scared and determined, she had asked me to come see her alone, without my father in the room. She'd handed me a sealed envelope and told me, "Put this somewhere your father will never look. Don't open it unless something happens with the house that doesn't feel right. You'll know." I was 22, grieving, overwhelmed. I had put that envelope in a fireproof lockbox at the back of my closet, and I am ashamed to admit I had genuinely forgotten about it for 6 years. I found it that night, still sealed, my mother's handwriting on the front. "For Megan, only if it doesn't feel right." Inside was a single notarized document, dated 2 weeks before the fraudulent amendment my father used, written and witnessed by Mr. Harmon himself, the same lawyer who had read the original trust to us. It was a formal, irrevocable restriction my mother had added, stating explicitly that no future amendment to the trust regarding the Cobalt Creek property would be valid unless it was also independently reviewed and co-signed by her sister, my Aunt Carol, acting as a named co-trustee, specifically as a safeguard against exactly the kind of pressure my mother apparently feared might come later, from exactly the kind of situation she may have sensed brewing even then. She had seen this coming. Somehow, even 6 years before it happened, she had seen this coming. The amendment my father used had never been co-signed by Aunt Carol, which meant, under my mother's own prior, earlier, and properly witnessed restriction, my father's amendment had never been valid in the first place. I had the last paper, the one that came before his, the one that beat his. Part 5, The Fight. I brought the document straight to Mr. Harmon the next morning. He read it twice, then looked up at me with something like relief on his face. "This changes everything," he said. "Your mother built in a safeguard specifically requiring co-trustee approval for any amendment. Fenn's amendment never had that. It was invalid the moment it was signed, regardless of your mother's capacity. Your father's sale was built on a document that legally never had any force." We filed within the week. Not just a claim against my father, a claim against the sale itself, nomming Patty Voss's purchase, my father's fraudulent amendment, and demanding the sale be voided and the trust be recognized as still legally in effect. My father was furious when he was served. He called me screaming that I was destroying the family over money, and that Denise's medical bills were real bills, Megan, not some game. Denise herself sent me a long, tearful text about how I'd never accepted her, and this was really about that. I want to say something here, because I think it matters. I didn't do any of this for money, and I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because my mother spent the last conscious weeks of her life anticipating a betrayal from the man she was married to, and she built a legal fortress specifically to protect me from it, and I was not going to let that fortress crumble because I was too tired or too sad to fight for it. Aunt Carol, when we contacted her, was devastated to learn what had happened and confirmed she had never signed or even seen any amendment. She testified to that in a sworn statement. 2 nurses from the hospital, tracked down through old employment records, confirmed my mother's documented confusion and heavy sedation in the days before Fenn's amendment was signed. Patty Voss, the poor woman who'd bought the house in good faith, ended up settling separately with my father's title insurance company once it became clear the sale had a fatal legal defect baked into it from day one. That wasn't her fault, and I made sure, through our lawyers, that she was made financially whole. I never wanted to punish an innocent bystander for my father's decisions. The case took 8 months. 8 months of depositions, of sitting across a table from my own father while lawyers picked apart the worst decision of his life, of Denise refusing to look at me in the hallway outside the courthouse. In the end, the judge ruled clearly. The Fenn Amendment was invalid due to the prior co-trustee restriction, regardless of any capacity question, and the sale of the Cobalt Creek property was voided. Title reverted to the trust. And because I had turned 28 during the litigation, the property vested to me, outright, exactly as my mother had always intended. Part 6. What was left after? I got the house back. I want you to know that first, because it's the ending everyone's waiting for, and it's true. But I didn't get my father back. Not really. We speak maybe 4 times a year now, short phone calls, careful and formal. He never apologized in any way that felt real to me. Mostly he apologized for how it made me feel, which is not the same thing as apologizing for what he did. Denise and I don't speak at all. Josh and I got married that September, a little delayed from the original date because of the lawsuit, but we got married on the dock at Cobalt Creek, the same dock my grandfather built, the same water my mother used to swim in every summer of her life. My Aunt Carol walked me partway down the makeshift aisle we set up in the yard, standing in for the mother who couldn't. I think about that sealed envelope a lot. 6 years it sat in a lockbox in my closet while I lived my life, got engaged, built a career, grieved in the slow, ordinary way that grief eventually becomes. My mother built a legal safeguard so precise, so specific, so quietly ahead of a betrayal she may not have even consciously known was coming, that it ended up saving the one physical piece of her I had left in this world. People ask me sometimes if I regret how hard I fought, given what it cost me with my father. I don't, because that house was never just wood and a dock and a view of the water. It was the last thing my mother had the power to give me, on her own terms, protected against everyone, including, as it turned out, the person she probably should have protected me from the most. I still keep her rosemary plants on the windowsill. They're doing just fine. If you've ever had someone try to quietly take something that was never theirs to take, I hope you find your own last paper. I hope it's still sitting somewhere safe. And I hope, when the moment comes, you're brave enough to open it. And